you can ask them why I'm no longer with Fox. You know, I'm not going to speak for them. My contract wasn't renewed. That's the line.
That's, of course, former Fox News contributor Sarah Palin sharing her own experience at the network, which this week lost its highest profile host, Bill O'Reilly, amid accusations of sexual harassment. O'Reilly denies the claims, calling them, quote, completely unfounded, but has agreed to leave Fox News. Let's bring in Dr. Gina Loudon, host of America Trends with Dr. Gina, and Peter Emerson, a Huffington Post contributor who's worked for 3 Democratic administrations. Good afternoon to both of you.
Good afternoon.
Gina, I'll start with you. What do you make of Palin's reaction? I mean, she's a staunch conservative, and even she won't defend O'Reilly. Do you think this signals a breach within the party, or what's your take?
I just think it's hard to discuss something that you weren't a part of. I mean, I've been asked repeatedly to comment on this, and of course, when you don't have the information, you weren't there, it's very hard to comment on it. And when we, you know, it's not as if we've seen a court case proceed and as if there's been a conviction of some sort. We have none of that. So we're all sort of speculating, guessing, and it's very hard to comment on that. So I could understand why she would sort of hem-haw on that.
I think it's because it's, you know, $13 million to several women. Let me go into this. In a new op-ed, writer and activist Margaret Hooper, she argues that O'Reilly's alleged behavior and the reaction to it, she says, is unconservative. So here's her take. She says one of the core pillars of the modern American conservative movement is its emphasis on personal responsibility. Mr. O'Reilly blamed others, embracing the victimization he so ridiculed of the American left. He claimed his departure was no fault of his own, but the cost of doing business as a high-profile media personality. Do you agree with that, Gina? And then are you satisfied with the response from other conservatives?
You know, I think that we have to take a really hard look at this. This isn't a partisan issue. This isn't a conservative issue or a liberal issue, Republican or Democrat. This is really, and it really cuts across all gender lines as well. This is something that we need to have a conversation about in our culture, and so for that reason, I'm glad these conversations are starting to happen now. But I think that we have to take a look, especially as women, at what lines we want to draw when we discuss things like sexual harassment, because some of the accusations that we'll hear thrown around are basic, you know, maybe name calling or improper comments. I don't want to equate that with rape, and I want to be very careful as we have these conversations that we distinguish those sorts of things, and that we don't try to pin this on one party or another, one network or another.
You know what it is? I think the challenge is, sorry to interrupt you, I think the challenge is even Bill O'Reilly. In fact, Peter O'Reilly's lawyer called the accusations a smear campaign from the far left. So they brought up the partisan issue. Peter, I'll let you weigh in here. How do you respond to that? It's not that, you know, the public at large is making it partisan. He is saying it's a campaign from the far left.
Well, exactly. I happen to agree with Gina that it shouldn't be partisan at all. It's absolutely despicable, unacceptable, and we need to be absolutely intolerant of it. The fact is that women got $13 million who were harassed, who were the victims, and the men who did the harassing got $65 million. That's 5 times as much money. There's something very skewed, and those are the facts. We don't have to wait for a trial to see what was ultimately decided behind closed doors in order to clear up, quote, the mess. So I find this all absolutely nonpartisan. It's something that needs to be continually exposed because it's happening all the time. And my concern is that when you have the President of the United States leading a lot of this with the vile and unacceptable language that he used in the Access Hollywood Billy Bush situation, then we've got a very poor example leading this country.
I should say both men obviously deny those allegations and say they were unfounded. This morning, author Jonathan Alter told my colleague Thomas Roberts that the claims against Bill O'Reilly could have a wide-reaching impact. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
Fox problem is going to spread to the White House because there are these outstanding cases among women who say that they were harassed by Donald Trump. Some of the same lawyers who were representing some of the Fox people are representing some of these women. Trump said during the campaign that he would sue them for what they said. He has not done so. These cases are moving forward, and you're going to hear a lot about them in the weeks and months to come.
Gina, do you think that, what do you say about that? The fact that he says it's, you know, kind of coming down the pipeline. Do you think it could be a problem for the president?
You know, I think that probably sexual harassment happens, you know, in most huge workplaces. I don't think that it's a particular problem at the White House, or I think we certainly would have heard about it. Certainly back during the campaign, I talked a lot, even on this network, about what happened in that moment, that Access Hollywood video, and nobody liked that. Nobody liked that. Everyone rebuked that. That's again, it isn't a partisan issue, and I think it's really important to note that. But I also wish, and I hope, I guess, that as these sorts of issues start to come to the surface, that we take a really hard look too at things that are happening in our culture that are going largely buried. Like, for example, this week, 2 doctors were convicted of genital mutilation of little 7-year-old girls.
Here's the thing.
I don't want to. Virtually buried.
I hear what you're saying, but I just have to be careful because I'm steering the ship here. We have to stay at the matter at hand. Listen, I'm in the news business. I can tell you a number of stories that aren't covered day in and day out. But in this moment, this is a story. It's a big story. And if you think about the hyper-partisan tone and the months surrounding the election and Bill O'Reilly's influence and his role in all of it, the fact that he's not there is a story. I mean, that people want to know. And Peter, I'll let you weigh in here politically. Now that he's not a player, at least every night, what happens? It is a fair question, and it is not a slight against whatever happened to that child, you know, goodness forbid. But do you hear what I'm saying? Go ahead, Peter.
Well, there's a compendium of Fox News personalities on various programs making very degrading and sexually innuendo comments to women. So obviously the departure of Roger Ailes, now the departure of Bill O'Reilly, doesn't seem to have changed the environment at Fox News. I'm not sure it's going to have a huge impact on their audience either. But I do think that what Gina said about continuing the conversation, and when there is any form of sexual harassment in the workplace, wherever, it needs to be brought to the fore. But the challenge is, in this environment, when you have the President of the United States using totally inappropriate, I mean, just intolerable, dishonorable, actually, language about women, and a particular woman in particular, the Access Hollywood tape, that's a very difficult thing because the president is in theory nonpartisan. He represents all of us, and he's supposed to set a moral, ethical standard for this country.
I should say, and as Gina, as you mentioned, yeah, go ahead. I mean, no one wants to see something happen, you know, inappropriate action toward women. Go ahead, Gina, keep it short, and I got to leave it there.
No, and if I can just... Sure. If I can just add to that, you know, Bill Clinton sort of set the tone. What he did in the White House, I think, has really penetrated our society. And it is a conversation that we need to continue to have going forward, because we do need to make sure both things, that women are not victimized, and also that people are not falsely accused. I think both of those standards need to be very, very carefully observed.
All right. And you know, you just mentioned you didn't want to make it political, but then you brought up Clinton.
Right.
So that's what I'm saying. It just
may I say that
Jonathan,
Jonathan Alter's correct. Because of the lawsuit against Bill Clinton, that's why Donald Trump is now in trouble.
Good discussion today, guys. Tough, but good. Dr. Gina Loudon and Peter Emerson, thank you for your time on this Saturday.
Thanks, Chanel.